welcome to this video in which we are going to make a pie chart using Plotly in Molab. So I've already opened up a new Molab document. Let's just go ahead and change the title. So we'll say this is my name's pie chart. You can title yours whatever you like. And we'll start by importing libraries that we want to use. So we have this import Marimo as MO. Again, we're not going to necessarily need this functionality, but we can have it. I just press tab to complete that. Then we need a library in order to plot things using Plotly. In particular, we need to import Plotly. We could import the entire library, but I'm going to import just part of it. And so what you've seen right now is import Marimo as MO. Essentially what's happening is that Marimo is the library that adds functionality to Python, and as lets us assign what's known as an alias to it so that we can refer to Marimo as just MO. Another thing we can do is just import part of a library. And so rather than typing import Plotly, I'll say from Plotly. And then I want a particular subpart even. And so the subpart I indicate by hitting period, and then subplots, I say import make subplots. There are several different ways that you can make a figure in Plotly. You don't have to do it the way that I'm showing you here with make subplots, but this is the one that I normally use. You'll also see things that use like graph objects and things like that. Right now, let's just do it this way. We can cover other ways in future videos. I want to run this cell and get both of these functionalities, so I'm just going to hold shift and press enter. That will run the cell and then generate a new cell underneath it, or move to the next cell if one exists. Since there wasn't one, it's made a new one for us. So I've run that cell. We have access now to Plotly. So what I want to do is make our pie chart. Now, the way that Plotly conceives of charts is in building it up in several different ways. And so essentially what we are going to have is sort of an overall figure that contains all the information about how to make this chart. We're going to assign this a variable, and a common thing we might call it is fig for figure. And then I'm going to say this equals make subplots, and it's a function. So we always use parentheses to open and close the call of the function, but we're not going to supply anything inside of that, what are called arguments. The default behavior is all we need. I'm going to leave a comment. And again, in Python, we have comments by using the pound sign and then adding what we want. So here we say we are making a Plotly figure object, just so that we can keep track of what's going on. Next, we need to add something to that figure. Like right now, it's just an empty figure. We're trying to make a pie plot. And so what we can say is fig.add pie. Now, the pie part of this, the thing that's the pie chart that we're actually trying to make, is considered a trace. That's sort of the formal thing that we say in Plotly, or like the formal name for this. And so we're going to supply information about what we want this pie chart to hold and display within this add pie function call. The construction that we have here is fig.add pie chart. And the technical terminology for this in Plotly is that this is a method of the figure object. So we made a figure object here, and then add pie is a method of that figure object. And that's what the dot indicates. I know there's a lot of terminology happening right now, but you'll see this over and over again as we move through the course, and you'll become familiar with it. And so we call, that's it, again, the technical name for this, we call the add pie method of the figure object. And so inside of this, we're going to specify the values we want to show. And in fact, what we can do is provide an argument for the values. And so inside of here, I'm going to say values equals, and then we're going to supply the values that we want for these slices. That means that we need to know what we're trying to plot and what values we're going to use. And so I'm going to direct us back to this website. There was a link for this in the assignment description, but this is the US Census Bureau's data for Pennsylvania. And we're going to plot a pie chart of the marital status of adults within Pennsylvania. Here is breaking it out by both male and female. We're just going to average these two numbers. That's not technically correct. We would want to actually perform a weighted average where we know how many males and females there are contributing to each one of these. But for right now, the focus is really on making this pie chart. And later on in the course, we'll consider ways to handle data better. So I have this data here. And what I can do is just type it in to this values. So if we took those average percents, what we might end up with is these numbers. So I'm going to give us a list of numbers. And in Python, the way that you say that you have a list is you have open and closed square brackets. Then you place the values inside of there, separated by commas. So this is 49.5, that'll be 1%. 9.5, that'll be the next percent. 34.7, that's the next percent. And 6.3%. So those are the values that we have now inside of our pie chart. The next thing that we need to do is essentially show this image. This is actually everything we need in order to have a basic pie chart. So to show the figure, there's two ways that we can do this. The most standard is to say fig.show. And so here we are calling the show method of the Plotly figure object to display the figure. Some typos there, but that's okay. Now, if I run this, what's going to happen is that Python is going to first make a figure object. It's going to assign that figure object to the variable fig. Then we're going to use the add pie method in order to add values to this pie chart and add the pie chart to the figure. And then we're going to show the results of that. And we can also bring up this variable explorer window. And right now you'll see we have a few variables already. MO, that was our alias for Marimo. And make subplots, that's something we imported here. I'm now going to run this cell. I don't need to put a cell below it, so I'm just going to hold Control and press Enter. And then we have a well-formed pie chart. That's as simple as it is to generate this object. You'll also see that we have a new variable called fig. All right, now this is fine. I think there's a few more things that we would normally expect to see when we deal with pie charts. And one would be a label for these categories. We didn't provide any label for it. And so basically, Plotly is just numbering them. 0, 1, 2, 3, and showing them here. And one thing you'll see is that they're not in order because the default behavior of Plotly is to order them in decreasing order as we go around counterclockwise. So that's why we have the first value, which is numbered 0. A lot of programming languages start counting at 0. And then the second value, or I guess number 2, the third value, so that would be this 34.7. And that's why we see this sort of behavior. You also notice that this figure, as it's shown, is interactive, which is also a nice feature of the default behavior of Plotly. Now, we're going to change this a little bit. The next thing I want to say, though, is just to show you that you don't have to say fig.show only because we're in a Marimo notebook. Because we're in a Marimo notebook, if I run this cell, and one thing I should point out before I run it is that when I started typing, this went gray. It's to show you that you changed something in the cell, but we haven't yet run it. So I'm going to rerun this cell. And now you'll see that the output was put up above. And that's a behavior from Marimo where we just say, okay, here's the figure object, and then display it, and it'll put it up above. But for here, I'm going to use show because that's more standard. It'll work in other programs. And so we're going to stick with fig.show as much as we can in these video tutorials. Again, it's been grayed out because I updated the text and haven't changed anything. So I'll rerun it. we're back to here. So now what we want to solve is the fact that there are no labels. All right, so we want something that tells us what these pie slices are going to be. And so what we want to do is include something that indicates what those are. So the easiest way to do that is inside the pie, add more information. Every time we want to have a new thing included in this function call, something that we would call an argument, we press a comma to indicate that we're starting something else. And it turns out that the labels that we want inside of the pie chart are just called label. And so what we can do is say labels equals, and just like when we supplied the values and we had a list of 4 different numbers, we're going to supply a list of 4 different labels. These labels are text, and as we saw in a prior video, how we represent text is in strings, and how we tell Python that we have a string is we place the value in between quotation marks. So here's quotation marks here. This first value, the big one, if I go back, we'll see that the biggest value was married. Then we had never married as the second largest value. And then we have divorced and widowed as well that we've included in this plot. And so we have currently married. If we match up what the next value is at 9.5, then we have divorced. And then the next value at 34.7 is widowed. And the last one is I messed up the order. This should be never married. And then this last one should be widowed. So one thing you'll notice is I have 4 values, 4 labels. I'm going to assign each one of these to the label associated with it in order. Also, if we go back to this, you'll notice there was 5. And so what I actually did was decided to fold separated into married, just so that we only had 4 slices to consider. So if you're worried about how the numbers are going to work out. Now, if I run this cell again, what you'll find is that I have a legend, and the legend matches up with what we expect. Currently married, never married, divorced, and widowed as we go around this. The last thing that we're going to do in this video is to get rid of this legend. As we talk about in the course, having legends is a violation of the design principle of proximity and separation. And so what we want to do as much as we possibly can is to avoid using legends to label our data. So how do we do that? The first thing that we want to do is tell it not to have a legend. We can do that by adding a new method. So we have a figure, and rather than controlling something about the trace, like the data or the label that's associated with it, we just want to control whether this shows up, this legend shows up. And so a way to do that is to just tell it not to show the legend. And this is part of the layout component of the figure. And so we're going to, not add layout, but update layout. And then inside of here, we can say show legend equals false. Something about Python is that the name false, if we're using it in order to specify what's called a Boolean value, a yes or no, a 1 or a 0, a true or a false, we use true and false, and the capitalization matters. So capital F false is how we have to do this every time. Now, if I run this, what you'll see is that the legend disappears. That's nice for us, but we've lost the information about what the name of each slice is. But that's something that we can add back in to the add pie. So if we go to the end of when we assign the labels, we can add some new information. So we type comma again, and then we tell it that what we would like to have inside of our slices is the label. Oops. So we're saying we had a label here, and we would like that label to be the thing that is put inside of the slices. So if I do that, now you see that these are labeled. We've lost the percentage, and if we wanted to have the percentage, we just say plus value, and then we'll get it back. So you can decide whether you want to have both the values and the label or not. For me, I think I don't really care about the exact values, but the proportion. And so I'll just use label here. And now we have a pie chart that's labeled that doesn't have a legend. And it is what we're looking for the first assignment. We're making a pie chart in Marimo. And at this point, you know how to now use Plotly to make a plot. You know how to add values to it, and you know how to get the result. So you can just take a screenshot of this and upload it to the assignment. There's one more thing I kind of want to point out, because it's going to make our life easier moving forward, which is that in Python, within this function call, it can span multiple lines. So one thing you'll see me starting to do just to make things readable is to press enter and have one thing per line. We still have to maintain the comma so that we know that we're moving between inputs. But something like this, to me, I'll put a comma here, it doesn't really matter if we have it or not, makes this much more readable, where now I have one thing per line, and this will still work out and give us the same result that we had before. All right, so that's where we're going to end this video. In the next video, we'll figure out how to export